I've been wondering, with all the chaos that's going on in America, and most of our attention, of course, is focused inward, focused on domestic issues and issues affecting our culture. What really is brewing on the foreign policy front? What is the big threat that's coming next that we are in some ways not even paying attention to? And one candidate for that is, of course, a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. And I want to talk about why I think that something like that could very well come during Biden's term, and why it might come sooner than later. Now, interestingly, a little tidbit here, Nancy Pelosi evidently is scheduled to visit Taipei, which is the capital of Taiwan. And she mentioned this to Biden, and evidently Biden said to her, it's, quote, not a good idea. So right away that caught my attention. What an odd thing for Biden to say. And then Biden goes on to say this, quote, well, I think that the military thinks it's not a good idea right now. And that's, to me, a second kind of warning, because why would the military think it's not a good idea if the military wasn't planning for or anticipating that the Chinese would take some military action in Taiwan? Now, Pelosi hasn't said whether she's going or not going. I only mention the incident because it seems to me that if the Chinese are going to do it, why wouldn't they do it now? Or to put it a little differently, why wouldn't they do it under Biden? What I'm getting at is not that the Chinese will invade Taiwan, but it seems that it's sort of rational for them to do it. Let's say that Biden keels over, or let's say that the Republicans come in the next time. Well, it's going to be harder for them to do it then. Why not do it when you've got this weak, confused, doddering man in the White House? Now, one argument may be, well, the Chinese are not going to do it because maybe they can hoodwink Taiwan into coming under Chinese influence. They won't need to use force. They can kind of con them into it. But that's not going to work because the Taiwanese can see what happened to Hong Kong. And so they've seen that Hong Kong basically has gotten the lights turned out because Hong Kong foolishly wandered into the Chinese orbit and said, we are trusting you to keep us Hong Kong. The Chinese are like, no, you're now part of China. End of story for the Hong Kong residents. They've just lost their freedom. And the Chinese have long known and said publicly that if they're going to use military force, they're going to use it decisively. Now, for a long time, the Chinese were not strong enough to really be able to pull this off. The U.S. has very powerful Navy. The U.S. is way ahead in technology. The U.S. spends more money on defense than the next 5 countries put together. And so the idea was the Chinese are not going to do this. They're going to get pulverized. They're going to get pulverized in their own region. It's going to not only not work, it's going to make them look bad. And so the Chinese might well lose. But I think there's now a shift in thinking that the United States has not actually properly cultivated its military. It spent the money, but most of that money has just gone in salaries. It's gone for people, just pay health care. And so it hasn't gone necessarily to carefully planned munitions and carefully planned counter strategies. And so there's an open question. Will the United States, first of all, we may not even have the will. The Biden people might be like, go ahead and take Taiwan. We're too lazy to do anything about it. We have no intention about doing anything about it. You identify with Taiwan, so Taiwan is yours. But even if there is a will, there may not be a way, because you might intend to block them, but this doesn't mean that you can block them. I mean, think about it. When the United States was not able to secure Kabul against the Taliban at a long distance away. No one denies the United States can protect its own border, but we're talking about a very distant type of conflict in Taiwan. We may not be able to do it. And again, the other argument that's been used for a long time that would deter China is economics. That the Chinese, they are building up their economy and they're very dependent on the world market. And there's a China price and they're selling goods all over the world. And all of that could be disrupted and the world economy could be thrown into a deep recession, if not a depression. But again, the Chinese view may be, well, yeah, but so what? We have built up our own domestic market over the past 30 years. A lot of our goods made in China are now sold in China. And so we could weather that kind of storm. So if this is important enough to us, we can do it, recognizing that there's a price to be paid, but it's a price that we are in fact willing to pay.